Another Tuesday Live. How are y'all doing today? Watching for the notifications to go out. Hello, everyone. Come on in. Say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're tuning in from. We're going to get this show on the road. So, hi. Hey, Cobalt. Always a pleasure. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Heather. Most people call me Nookie. I teach workshops, I write books, I think about love, sex, romance, and of course, kink. And I put that out into the world for people of all genders, relationship statuses, orientations, and more. I have always been curious and adventurous when it comes to all of those wonderful things having to do with humans getting together. And I've explored many facets of sexuality in loving and creative ways with different people in different parts of the world. And all of my experiences, every single one of them thus far, have led me to the belief that healthy boundaries are the key to not only saving ourselves, but our relationships. They're what take us from getting by or merely average to healthy, loving, strong, and fan-fucking-tastic. So let's get started. I'm going to kick us off with an introduction to the book I'm working on right now and how I'm writing it. Hi, Mandy. Hello, Janie. Lovely to have you. So I'm writing my new book, Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck. That's the working title right now. And you can get access to the chapters as I write and post them by registering for my Take No Shit workshop, which I'm going to pop that into the chat right there and put it up on the screen. There's the link to access it if you're interested. Take No Shit is all about building strong, functional, healthy boundaries for yourself. We take you through a step-by-step program with some live videos, with some worksheets, and with a lot of information. And then Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck is a deep dive into boundaries. It's everything you would want to know about creating, maintaining, understanding personal boundaries. And so it's a project I took up in August, which was my birthday month, as sort of like a passion project. And I realized that people were giving me feedback that it really made a huge difference. So I've been sticking with it because I'm really vibing with the topic of boundaries right now. And I really love what y'all are bringing to the table with your questions and your insights. So I'm seeing some familiar faces, and I'm also seeing some new names. So hey, Sabia Sachi, always a pleasure to see you. Hello, the moon's halo. Lovely to have you. And it's your birthday month, Cobalt. Well, happy birthday month. I hope you're celebrating. Or not if you don't celebrate. I do. I love to celebrate, but any excuse will do the trick. So today we are here to talk about emotional boundaries, which is a huge deal. So, did you know that they're boundaries? Whew, I got boundaries on the brain. Did you know that emotions, feels, are contagious? I'm sure you did if you think about it, right? You are having a great day, and maybe somebody you love is having kind of a crappy day, and they come home and they're feeling grumpy and cranky and whatever. And suddenly you are right there with them. How many people have had that experience? Hey. Lots and lots and lots of times. And there are multiple reasons that we might catch feelings from others. One of those reasons is if you are a very empathetic person, right? If you uh, feel empathy naturally. Yeah, we're definitely seeing some hands raising. Excellent. So if you're one of those people, wow, that sounded awful. If you're one of those people who feel feelings, I didn't mean it like that at all. If you are the type of person who tends to be sensitive to others' feelings, you have probably throughout your life found it difficult to separate yourself from others when they are feeling strongly. You may have also noticed that sometimes it's difficult to determine what feelings you're receiving from them and what feelings were yours to begin with. Anyone else experience that? Um, when it's really hard to separate yourself from they're feeling sad, therefore I'm feeling sad. They're feeling angry, therefore I'm feeling angry. Or for those of you who are empaths, how about the, hey, what's wrong? Nothing. And you feel it though, like you feel something's wrong, right? And then even worse, you might get anxiety about that feeling and you start thinking about why they could be feeling that way. And it takes you down a whole spiral where you not only catch their feels, but then you add to it with your own feels, fears, insecurities, right? And you start spiraling and actually magnifying those feels, right? Here's the challenge with being empathic. You can't always tell where the feels are coming from. And when you catch the feels, you don't always know why they had them to begin with. So I'm one of the other types of people. I don't have that like natural gift of empathy. Like I don't feel what others feel naturally, which is both a blessing and a curse. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of my besties for most of my life is very empathetic. And one of the things that I noticed with him is that he would often feel how others were feeling, but then he would do one of two things, or perhaps sometimes both of two things. A, he would misinterpret why they were feeling that way. And he would somehow take on this responsibility for himself to fix it. Like, gotta make this better, which doesn't work, right? Cosmopolite, hey, it's always a pleasure to see you. Cosmopolite says, our nervous systems read the nervous systems of others. Yes, if, unlike me, you're not born faulty. I don't have that natural reading system inside of me. And it's important to understand that a lot of people are on a range from like super feely, empathetic to almost no empathy at all. That's me over here. I was born that way. So, what I've learned to do, and this is where the other types of people come in, what I've learned to do is to create a data bank in my head of when people behave this way in the past, they have felt that way. Right. So for me, the better I know somebody, the more empathetic, learned empathy I can be towards them. So important to understand when you're interacting with people. One of the things, though, that's really interesting about who I am as a person is because of who I am and because I don't catch feelings and then reflect them back to people, very heavily empathetic people are attracted to me because they can emote at me and it doesn't get magnified back. Have any of you experienced this? Like you throw emotions at somebody and instead of getting them back like tenfold, they're able to absorb your emotions and just be. So that's very attractive and why many people say opposites attract, right? So I'm not as bothered. I don't go into that spiral and reflect emotions back at people in the same ways that two very empathetic people might do to each other, right? Especially, let me add, very empathetic people who have not been taught good emotional boundaries, right? Sabyasachi says, isn't being empathetic good character? Yes and no. So empathetic, let's talk about this for just a second because I think this is a really important thing to understand. Empathy is a wonderful skill to have. It can be used in both negative and positive ways. That said, people who are highly empathetic tend to be kinder and more compassionate because they can feel the hurt of others. Make sense? Whereas, I'll be very clear here, people who are like me with less empathy tend to be less kind and compassionate or not as easily understanding of somebody else's point of view, but not always. As somebody said in a very, very different manner, there are good people on both sides. And in this case, there are also not so good people on both sides. People can use their empathy to, as Cobalt says, manipulate people, right? So, yes, in general, having empathy for others, especially empathy as a skill, like actually using your empathy to create better communication and engagement with others is absolutely a wonderful thing. It can also be overwhelming. It can feel like you can't get away from other humans. And it can also, as I said, help you manipulate others because you understand them better. Right? So, what I try to talk about in these boundaries lives that I do, and in the book that I'm writing, and in the workshop, I try to talk about behaviors versus personalities or versus skill sets or versus types of people, right? So rather than labeling a human, we talked about this last week a bit. We got into what is toxic because that's going to be a topic that's coming up on the calendar for a live. What is toxic? Rather than labeling a human as good or bad or toxic or weird or whatever, I prefer to look at behaviors. Does this person behave in a way that is good for me, that's a good fit for me? Cosmopolite just mentioned empathy without boundaries equals toxic empathy. Yeah. So let's talk about this. Let's dig in. Ooh, Aaron has a point here. As an empath, I'm extremely self-aware and understanding of other people. However, I'm also hypersensitive to everything sensory, be it emotions, violent films, large crowds, sudden noises, etc. Absolutely. And again, so you're seeing some of the positives of being empathetic, and you're seeing some of the negatives, right? On the other side of things, with somebody with low empathy like myself, I'm not very sensitive to a lot. In fact, I would say that when I was younger, I had almost no proper fear because I could do things with other people and not pick up on the fact that they were fearful or that something might be dangerous to them. They could, like, I didn't pick up on that communication from them where many people in that situation would, right? So again, there's a balance. And for me, the important thing when it comes to emotional boundaries is one, what is me? What is not me? Right? In your case, what is you? What is not you? Where do you end and others begin? Right? That's important. And two, do these interactions with another human add overwhelming value to my life, or do they detract from my life? Right? It doesn't mean that somebody is bad or good. Return to sender. Absolutely, Janie, 100%. Right? Somebody who is super, super dramatic, demonstrative, and so on and so forth, right? For some people, that might be too much, right? Especially for somebody like Aaron, who might be sensitive to loud noises and loud emotions, right? When you're around somebody who is emoting very loudly, that can feel a bit like sandpaper, right, to your senses. Now, for me, I can be around really loud people. I love loud people. I love people who are super demonstrative and super feely in big, big ways because they are not battering me with their emotions, right? Like a battering ram hitting a door. Whereas somebody who's far more sensitive is going to feel like you're getting hit with a Mack truck with somebody who is super powerful and emoting constantly, right? Oh, and then Aaron mentions the energy sponges, right? The people who come in to your life, into your day, into whatever, and they suck your energy from you. Oh, I'm having such a bad day. Do you have a few minutes? Can you help me feel better? Right? Which is fine when you have that energy to give and you're able to fill yourself back up. Right? Like, we all love to help our friends, but when we have those people who are the energy sponges or the emotional vampires or the trauma dumpers, right? Who come in without warning and bam, hit you with their need or hit you with their loud emotions or whatever it is, it can be really challenging, right? Cobalt says, "Hi, my name is Cobalt and I'm an emotional Mack truck." Installing a brake system. So for those who aren't aware, Cobalt is actually in both the Boundaries Live Right and the Take No Shit workshop, working through his own boundaries. So when he talks about being an emotional Mack truck, installing a brake system, He is specifically focused in on the work he is doing with his own boundaries. Okay. Janie says, psychic vampire. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about emotional boundaries. Okay. Let's throw out some examples of not so strong emotional boundaries. How about someone online, for example, insults you or bullies you or whatever, and you allow that to affect your entire day. So this is something I found online that I thought would be a great point to bring up here. If you wouldn't go to someone for advice, don't take their criticism either. Right? If you wouldn't go to someone for advice, don't take their criticism. And we were just talking in the Take No Shit No in the Boundaries Live Right about unsolicited advice, right? Cosmopolite was a part of that conversation. Cobalt was a part of that conversation, right? So unsolicited advice, right? If you don't go to them for advice, will you take their criticism? And is their unsolicited advice veiled criticism? Oh, it was in the Take No Shit workshop. Okay, thanks, Cosmopolite. I know we've got, between the Boundaries Live Right and the Take No Shit workshop, we've got a lot of conversations going on, which is lucky. So if you're interested in joining us for those, it's just one link, one sign up, right there, because you get both the Live Right and the workshop at the same time. So yay. So Cobalt asks a great question. What about those you would go to for advice? So here's the thing. Good boundaries means that you will be able to take advice, but not necessarily internalize it without giving it a really good think, right? Also, what would you go to advice? What would you go to them about? What advice would you go to them for? Wording today, it's hard. So I might go to my father for advice about many things. I would not go to my father for lots of reasons for advice about love. My father and I are radically different humans. We see the world in very different ways, despite our similarities. I am a hopeless romantic. He's not really. So if my father gave me advice about love, I would say, thank you so much, Dad. I appreciate it. I know you love me and want the best for me. This is not going to happen, right? So, but going back to that question, someone insults or bullies you, do you allow it to affect your next hour, your whole day, more? Aaron says, I've gotten into the habit of unfollowing, not unfriending, but removing their posts from my feed. People who shit post drama that makes me feel less at peace. That, right there, everyone, right there. Aaron has a beautiful boundary set. I don't need to see it. I don't need to unfriend you. I don't need to see it, right? That was going to be my next question. I wouldn't go to one person for advice about everything. So does that then mean I shouldn't accept all criticism from them? Absolutely. Absolutely. Accept criticism from people that you respect within that area, right? And better yet, accept feedback rather than criticism from people you respect in that area and who treat you with honor and respect, kindness and compassion, right? So you know when you know what's best for you, hopefully, which is part of setting good boundaries, right? Learning, again, this is the thing. A good boundary is where I end and you begin. If I know all the bits and bobs of me, if I know what's supposed to belong inside all of this, right? Then other people's advice, criticism, expectations, whatever, can inform me without distressing me, right? I can learn that I maybe said something that was misunderstood or I came across in a way I didn't intend while still knowing what I intended and being able to say, ooh, I could do better, right? But still knowing that I did the best I could and I did a really good job for what I knew at that time, right? I was trying to be compassionate and kind, even if I failed. So I don't need to take criticism, but I can take advice or suggestions or thoughts or feedback or whatever that is, right? Mandy Girl says, I don't have a good gut instinct, or rather, don't, nail on the head. Don't have a good gut instinct, or rather, don't listen well to it. This is beautiful. 100%. Let me tell you something, Mandy. We had a live a couple of weeks back. It's not your fault, right? It is not your fault that you have craptaculous boundaries because as we're raised by people who believe that having strong boundaries will not make us happy. They want the best for us. And so they teach us to please others, including them, right? Despite, there you go, Mandy, what your gut tells you, right? So you are taught as a young child into adulthood and then by partners, in addition to parents and friends and so on and so forth, that you should not listen to your gut. Instead, you should pander to, please others. Not your fault. However, moving forward, it is your responsibility, right? You know this about you now. Now is the time to start doing something about it for you and for everybody in your life who loves you and wants to see you shine as brightly as you can, right? Aaron says, and if person X has always had your back, when they step up and call you out, maybe you are out of line or at least need to hear their perspective. Absolutely. Here's the way I look at it. If someone I truly adore and respect calls me out, even if sometimes I feel like it's out of their realm of expertise, if I truly love them, if I truly respect them, I want to pause and listen. I want to give them the opportunity to express themselves to me. And so one of the things I talk about when I talk about boundaries is I talk about boundaries and ethics are opposite sides of the same coin. Boundaries are how I allow myself to be treated. Ethics are how I choose to treat others. So if I have feelings about somebody and I want to be able to tell them, I want them to honor me and listen to me, right? So that's what I desire out of people. How do I turn that around with my ethics? I give that to people that matter to me when they need it from me, right? Cobalt says, I discovered yesterday that I need better boundaries to allow for my own grief. Yeah. Aaron, and women in particular are taught to silence their inner voices because they are to take care of others. This is true. This happens to AFABs quite a bit. However, let's also turn this around and listen to what we might be hearing right now about a lot of AMABs and the intersection of masculinity with toxic masculinity and dampening down those emotions and not being able to validate or feel what they feel, right? So emotionally, their gut instinct is often going to be crippled as well, because we have taught all humans that emotions, instincts, when it comes to emotions and the way we feel, are bad in 100 different ways, right? Cobalt says, I think if I treat my own emotions with more care, I'll avoid putting myself where others can accidentally bump into my hurts. Ooh, yeah. Mandy girl, that is absolutely a good point. So that's the other thing, is that when people transition, or even just going through life in different cultures, right? Like going from like a small Midwestern culture, marrying into like a boisterous, loud New York Italian culture, right? We learn different things about boundaries based on how we're experiencing life. And gender is one of the ways. How we gender present and how we gender identify is one of the ways that we experience life that cuts right to the core of who we are. Very key, right? Okay, let's look at another. An acquaintance says something hurtful, maybe just sort of like offhand, like maybe compliments you and says, you know, I really like the way you said da 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 da. It actually surprised me, right? Something like that can poke at you, right? For a while. What about you have that friend? A lot of people have that friend that constantly dumps their troubles on you, leaving you feeling sapped of energy. The emotional vampires, psychic sponges. How about a coworker regularly tracks you down and shares workplace gossip that you really don't want to hear about the people that you work with, right? Like, you don't want to hear this stuff. You just want to work. You don't want to get caught up in all these workplace dramas. Mandy Girl says, I trauma dump too much. So that is a big deal. Absolutely. And it's something that now that you're acknowledging this, or maybe you've acknowledged it in the past, it's something to work towards doing less. And the best way to trauma dump less is to A, get some good emotional boundaries in place, and B, always ask for consent. How many people, Janie W says, how to find the time and place for real talk. Yeah. How many people here Make a habit of asking for consent for their conversations. I really need to rant. Do you have a few minutes? I'm having a hard time processing something. Do you have 15 to 20 minutes to help me work through something in my head? My partner and I had a really bad fight last night. I'm wondering if I could get your opinion on it. Oh, hey, I'd like to ask you about your experience with something. It has to do with some abuse that you've been through in the past. Is there a good time that we might be able to sit down and talk it through? Right? Aaron says it depends on the type of conversation. Absolutely. Of course, it's going to depend. You don't need to do that for every conversation, right? However, let me throw something out with that. A lot of, let's say, AFABs, for example, a lot of AFABs, the way our brains are wired, is we can talk much more quickly and easily. We can jump from topic to topic to topic to topic to topic and always stay on top of the game. It's part of how we're socialized. It's part of how our brains often work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of AMABs are not quite as adroit or facile, especially in emotional situations. Again, because we were talking about pushing those emotions down. They've been taught to push those emotions down. So in conversations, I learned a couple years ago, I realized that all of my life I had been accidentally, I mean, on purpose, but accidentally bullying the men I loved with my conversational skills. Because I would get into an argument with them and I would use my emotional ability with words to be right. And I could wear them down. So now in my life, a big part of my life is, hey, I'd really like to talk about XYZ. Here's the summary. We don't need to talk about it right now. I just wanted to throw that out there. And sometime within the next couple of days, I'd like to have this conversation, right? It gives my partner a chance to think over what I'm talking about and what their feelings might be in the situation. Whoops. Yeah, some require a certain mental energy, time frame, etc. And to have that forethought coming into the conversation that I obviously already have because I'm the one starting the conversation and I already have all the opinions, right? So, consent. Janie says, balance. Yeah. Sabyasachi says, learned a new thing, emotional bullying. I didn't realize I was doing it. I thought if I won an argument, that it was because I was right. And it took being as deeply in love as I am with my partner. And remember the conversation we had last week about, have you ever wanted to kick a puppy? Realizing that I never, ever, ever wanted to hurt my partner on purpose or on accident just because I was feeling hurt. So that's what it took for me to realize that there is a better way. to have conversations. So, with all of these poor emotional boundaries, the real crime here is the one that you commit against yourself. When you allow others to control how you feel, to greatly impact your self-image or what is right or wrong without even realizing it, that's when you know you need better emotional boundaries. So, what if your emotional well-being was truly a priority for you? And you chose who you would allow to affect your emotions. Huh? How about only people who have earned your trust? People who have shown you that they respect you for who you are as a person right now. People who have built a bond of mutual consent, love, and affection with you. And going back to that, respecting you for who you are as a person right now. People who love you for who you are, flaws and all. What if you knew that the people in your life, the ones that you really cared about and let in, were like what I just said? They would never, ever intentionally hurt your feelings, and they don't ever, ever, ever accidentally want to hurt your feelings, right? What would be possible? This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries are not just what you don't want to do emotionally. They're about protecting your mental and emotional well-being and separating yourself from others so that you can choose who is really worth exposing your feelings to. Aaron says, as an empath married to a narcissist, winning an argument has nothing to do with being right. Ding. And actually, I'm gonna pull that one back up because I want to say something here. So that is a combination that happens a lot of empathetic people end up with people on the other side of the spectrum. It's a trap. Like it's a pattern of behavior. It feels right in so many ways. It feels familiar in so many ways to people because they do this all the time. And that is where we have to start looking at, rather than, am I an empath and is this a narcissist or an abuser, or in my case, a psychopath, or, empathy deficit disorder, or just a troubled soul. All of those labels, push those out of the way and let's look at the behaviors. Are these behaviors filling us up and creating the relationship that we want or not? Because if it's or not, it doesn't matter if they're a narcissist. It doesn't matter if they're an asshole. It doesn't matter if they're a really awesome person and their mother loves them, because it's not working. But we get trapped in that, oh, but they're not a bad person, or, oh, they really love me. And I'm going to tell you this, for those of you who do not know me, I am not talking out my ass right now. I was in an emotionally abusive marriage. I know exactly how this works. I was here for it, right? I went through the whole boiled frog syndrome, a little bit at a time until I was in so deep, I didn't know what to do about it. And I came out the other side. And that is partly why this boundaries work for me is a passion project, right? Because that was 15 years ago now. And I have worked so hard on creating the me that I am today. And watching other people create the thems that they want to be with good boundaries is fucking brilliant. So, yeah, little segue there. Woohoo! Cobalt says, I think as I trust myself to only allow people around me who won't hurt me on purpose, I can unravel my defense mechanisms that are emotionally abusive or manipulative. Yes, you can. Absolutely. Absolutely. Aaron says, Cobalt, I promise you can undo that past training. Yeah. Oof. Ouch. My father was an emotionally abusive narcissist. Whew. Right. Did I have kids? I did not. Thankfully. Thankfully. Whew. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just coming out of it like 2 weeks ago. This breakup. Oof. But I do wish the best for you because you know what? This is the time. This is definitely the time to learn to set those boundaries before you start engaging in other relationships, or at least as you start engaging, start looking at what boundaries mean to your relationships. Yeah. Cobalt says, if you'd like to know my story, feel free to join Nookie's Live Right. And the journal is there. Aaron, whoops, did I hit the right one? Nope. Sorry. That's my struggle. The kids. Yeah. And while I can't speak to the children in the Boundaries Live Right and in the Take No Shit workshop, there is another person who absolutely can speak to having children and getting out of that relationship that she was in. And she's actually my first official protege when it comes to boundaries, Celine. And she has a lot to say about what the journey is like and also what it's meant for her children. She told me yesterday, she was actually sitting here, we were doing some work together. She said, you know, I give you credit for, insert my youngest son's name here, because as I went through all of this work, I shared it with him and he got to learn right beside me. And I am so damn proud of that boy. So for what it's worth, this boundaries work can be so amazing for the people around you that you love, not just your children, but for your partners and your friends and so on and so forth, when you can live as an example, right? And do things differently. So, so Mandy girl, single and not at all ready to mingle for a while. When I left my ex-husband, I spent almost a full year alone, working on myself, going over like everything and trying to figure out where I could have taken better responsibility, where I could have taken better care of myself, where I went wrong, and also learning where blame lies, which, by the way, when people abuse you, they are to blame for the abuse. Period. End of story. I may have failed at removing myself quickly enough or at understanding what this was doing to me or whatever, but I did the best with who I was, where I was, And now looking back, I can say, moving forward, I can change that pattern. I will not accept that again. Right? A year. It took me a year of like barely leaving the house except to get groceries and to walk the dogs and so on and so forth. But then the year after that, I went on 127 dates. So, yeah. So that is one of the things, Janie, about the Take No Shit workshop is that we are actually creating boundary buddies. Interesting that you say that. I didn't use that term, but we're actually going to be working with each other through the boundaries and talking with each other about how we can set rules, how we can handle crisis situations, practicing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. Yeah, notes in the journal. I did a lot of that. One of the things that's also, and I talk about this in the workshop and in the book, taking notes, actually writing them down is a great way to engage your brain. Reading them to yourself is another great way to engage your brain. And then explaining your notes to another human is another way to engage your brain. So one of the things I talk about in the Take No Shit workshop is how we can engage your brain to use it for you to build and strengthen your boundaries. Science. I do a lot of research into the science of the brain and how we work and that sort of thing because I had to do this for me way back then when I had to behavior modify myself. So, yeah. I read stuff back to my therapist. Absolutely. And that's something that when we were talking, I did a bunch of interviews at the beginning of the Boundaries book to talk to people about, their boundaries and their journeys and, how they talked and thought about boundaries. And when we talked, we recorded the interviews and I told them, the ones that had therapists, I told them, feel free to take this to your therapist and share it. Because they might have additional insights based on the things I've said. And they might have ideas and suggestions for you based on the conversation you just had with me. Because sometimes hearing how people talk to somebody else can make a huge difference. I started rewatching your replays with my bestie to help him catch up, and then we discuss it. Ooh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Discussion and digging deeper into the ideas, huge, right? Because when your brain goes into, I have to explain this to someone else, I have to explain my perspective to someone else, you actually get down to your perspective even better, more clarity, right? So let's talk about the 9 types of emotional boundaries. Because in the Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck book, I go over 9 different types of emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries are so huge. I dig down into these so that we have the opportunity to really, really pick our emotions apart and examine what is important to us, right? So 9 types of emotional boundaries. Sharing is caring. When is it right to share your emotions with others? Emotional priorities. What emotions do you pursue? And which emotions would you rather have less of in your life? Intensity. Do you like to feel deeply and passionately? Maybe lots of ups and maybe a few downs, right? Because that keeps the roller coaster interesting. Or would you rather have less in your life, a little bit more Even keel. People talk about balance a lot. High highs and low lows balance each other out just as much as two itty bitty little things, right? Even keel or a little bit more deep and passionate. Communication in emotional boundaries. Do you like to talk about your feelings? Or do you prefer to just let things flow? My feelings will catch up when they catch up. Hmm? And then what we were talking about earlier, my feelings, your feelings, right? Recognizing your feelings as yours and not as leakage or influence from another. And knowing that others' feelings are not your responsibility. Let's pause on that for a second. Others' feelings are not your responsibility. Show of hands or yeses or whatever in the chat. How many people have either, and I'm going to give you an out here, have either said or had it said to them, "You made me so mad"? Have you said it? Yeah. Have you had it said to you? Yeah. Others' emotions are not your responsibility. And your emotions are not somebody else's responsibility. Boundaries, ethics. Okay, more. Lies and lying. Cosmopolite, I think we're all guilty, Nookie. Lies and lying. What do you accept? What do you excuse? And which are necessary? Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Sorry, 10 types of emotional boundaries we'll cover. Relationships. How do you invest emotionally in friendships and love? Huh? Validation and rejection. Do you feel validated and supported by the people in your life? Do you feel rejected when someone sets a boundary? Triggers. What words or actions are able to instantly shift your mental state in positive or negative ways, if any? Do you have triggers? And then I guess I added this last one in and forgot to count it. Oopsies. In the original writing, I made that change. Emotions on social media. How do you manage your emotions on social media? And what do you allow or disallow from others? Erin gave us a perfect example earlier, right? People are always bringing things that affect my emotional stability that I don't like. I just mute them on social media. I don't unfriend them. I just don't see them in my feed anymore. That is a wonderful emotional boundary, right? So those are the 10 types of emotional boundaries. And I discuss those in great detail in the Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck book. Like deep. Let's go into each one of those and lots and lots of discussion. Roger says, I have a few triggers and some are hard to let go of. How about I have a few triggers and some are hard to get rid of? Because letting go sounds like you want to hold on to them, right? Or better yet, I have a few triggers And some are hard to exterminate, but I'll get it. Getting better at it every day, right? Cobalt says, PTSD involves avoidant behaviors. It's important, in my humble opinion, not to confuse those with boundaries. Absolutely. So real quick, though, because we're coming up on an hour here, and I do want to talk about something here real quick. I want to talk about what are emotions, right? What are emotions? Emotions happen in about a quarter of a second in our minds and bodies in response to stimulus, either real or imagined, and are affected by things like our current mood, perceived threats, whatever. Chemicals are produced to prepare us for some sort of reaction and are released in another quarter second. So emotions last about 6 seconds. They are our body's warning system to inform us when something goes wrong or to let us know that something's going very right. Emotions. Feelings are usually a combination of multiple emotions happening in our bodies at any given time. And so after we experience the emotional sensation and the chemical dump, and we begin to process it in our minds, feelings are the interpretation of those emotions we experience in our mind and our body. So Mandy, when you said earlier that you may not pay as much attention to your gut, part of that is you know that you're feeling emotions. You know your mind and body are warning you of something or telling you something. And you also know that sometimes your feelings, your interpretation of those is not so spot on. And part of that is because A, you've been taught to disbelieve those things. No, you can't possibly be feeling that. You must be feeling this. But also B, because sometimes instead of allowing other people to cross our boundaries, we stomp our boundaries ourselves in order to be liked or loved, right? Or in order to get through a situation or whatever. So the emotions are the physiological aspects that we feel for about 6 seconds. And then the feelings are how we identify those emotions, right? From there, we have thoughts. As we process and interpret our feelings, we think about them. And then we interpret them further and assign meaning consciously. That's when you are able to pause and say, I feel sad. But are you feeling sad? One of the things that I like to promote when it comes to feelings is emotional intelligence. So, do you feel sad? Or maybe are you feeling a little down, blue, frustrated, upset, disappointed, despair, right? Ick. You know, being able to have a larger emotional vocabulary allows us to experience a wider range of feelings, to interpret our emotions in a wider variety of ways. Janie says, I don't know, feels like a lot of unpacking to the logic. Could you rephrase that? I'm not quite sure what you're saying there, and I'd like to be able to address it. And then there's the mood. So a mood is the gathering of our feelings and our thoughts, added to other stimuli such as like weather, the company around us, atmosphere, physiology, like how are you physically feeling? And then the mood can last as little as a few minutes and as long as days, months, years. And then there's the actions, what we do in response to our thoughts and moods. So I like to talk about this because it's important to understand when we're planning to set emotional boundaries, to understand how emotions, feelings, thoughts, mood all inform our actions, right? Janie says, well, when you were speaking about reading the emotion within to get the actual thing to respond correctly. So I think I might know where you're going with that. So, gosh, who was it? There's a psychologist, space between feeling. I'm going to look this up. Who said that? Here we go. I hate this guy, but whatever. Viktor Frankl. Anybody know Viktor Frankl? I'm going to copy this. So this was Okay. So I'm going to put this up on the screen. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom, often attributed to Viktor Frankl. Okay, so let me tell you this. Viktor Frankl, don't like him. Don't like that concept at all. But we have an opportunity. Gosh darn it. There we go. Get rid of that. There we go. We have an opportunity, Janie says. Well, when you were speaking about reading the emotions within to get the actual feeling to respond correctly, and reading my body and recognizing what this actually is. Yeah. Okay, so the idea, you said unpacking to the logic. We're not unpacking to the logic. We are still focused on the emotion. It's just understanding that we're not always interpreting our emotions to feelings in the ways that suit us. Sometimes we're interpreting them in the ways we've been taught, right? Rather than the ways that would actually function for us. And when Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and that space is our power to choose our responses. This is a very ableist approach because there is not always a space between stimulus and response, right? When we've been traumatized or we're in crisis situations, there is not always a space there. However, as we get more practice with our emotions and creating boundaries around ourselves and with others, for ourselves and for others, with us, we get better at what we're doing, right? And rather than expanding that space, we actually just get better and better at being correct, attributing feelings to our emotions more correctly, and then our thoughts to our feelings more correctly for us, because we're getting in touch with us, because we're learning to keep out others, what others have taught us, what others are trying to tell us now, how others are trying to manipulate us or move us, right? Does that make more sense? Oh, Cobalt says ADHD reduces that space. Absolutely. And PTSD kind of obliterates that space. Absolutely. Crisis, trauma, All of those things affect this 100%. Cosmopolite says, emotions are the raw thing we immediately feel. Feelings are our interpretations. Yes, exactly so. So let's talk about this a little bit. Some examples that I have for you. Emotion. Experience an emotion and interpret it as painful, right? So the feeling, I am sad. The thought might be, my heart is broken. The mood might be sitting on the couch with a tub of Ben & Jerry's and wallowing in ennui, right? The actions could be watching sappy romantic movies, crying, right? How about this? Emotion. Experience an emotion with your heartbeat speeding up and your mind feeling light, and interpret it as pleasure. Bye, Erin. It was lovely to have you. The feeling, I feel love. The thought, this person is wonderful. I love them. Right? The mood, floaty, happy, obsessed. The actions, sending sweet messages, smiling a lot, whistling, maybe having sex together or solo, right? So going back to what I said about emotional boundaries are about protecting your mental well-being and separating yourself from others so that you can choose who's really worth exposing your feelings to. You can see that emotional boundaries can cover a wide range of situations and activities, right? Womanopolis, hello. What do you think of a phrase that says, don't tell others your intimate secrets? I think whoever uttered that phrase was probably hurt at some time in the past and is still hurt. I tell people my intimate secrets all the time. I tell people I trust and love and who love me my intimate secrets. And I think that that's kind of what you have to do in order to build intimacy. You cannot create deep love and intimacy and passion without sharing intimate secrets, in my opinion. So I'm willing to take the risk. So we've run over a bit today. I got a hair. It has been an absolute pleasure to have every single one of you here. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to pop that up there. There you go. If you'd like to join me for that workshop, I would love to have you. Thank you again for joining me today. For those of you who came in the middle or who don't know me, hi, I'm Nookie or Heather Claus. I'm currently writing my next book, Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck, live. You can get it chapter by chapter at that link right there by registering for the Take No Shit workshop, which is going right now. It is a 7-week workshop about how to set boundaries from start to finish. And you can get it for, well, it's a name your price. So the maximum price is $27, which is $4 per week. This is the first time I'm running it though, and I'm running it on a beta. So if you think it's worth $27 or you think it's going to be worth $27, please pay that. Otherwise you can get it for as low as $7, $1 per week, just for joining me and being a part of that workshop and giving me the feedback that I'm looking for. Eventually, just so you know, the workshop is going to be priced at $197 for that 7-week period. So just to give you an idea of the value, I'm running it through with a couple of groups of people because I want to make sure that I'm providing the value. Oh, Cobalt. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you. Cobalt says it's worth $2,700. So please, do consider joining me for that. I would love to have you. And there is no better time than right now to do that. And real quick, let me take a look. So Thursday, I will be back at 2 p.m. Eastern. So this one was at noon Eastern. I will be back at 2 p.m. Eastern. Oh, Shoesnit. What is my schedule for Thursday? Okay. Ooh. So Thursday, I'll be talking what is toxic anyway. So we're actually going to be talking about labeling people as toxic versus talking about what behaviors we allow in our lives. So, and then next Tuesday, we'll be talking about what is you in a relationship. And then the following Thursday on the 10th, non-compromisables. So I actually have my schedule figured out through December 8th. December 12th on December 12th, I actually go in and I have the first of a couple of surgeries. So between December 12th and potentially mid-January, I'm not going to be scheduling these lives too far ahead. If I can do them, I will do them. It will depend on, how I'm coming back from surgery and how I'm feeling and that sort of thing. So, we do have, though, before that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 more lives before that surgery, 2 per week. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much again. Thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and hopefully I will see you on another live.